phytoplanktton blooms?
I think they're a type of, kind of like an undersea thing. I'm not really sure.
And while pollution is bad, is it so bad that we should have, with an evil resume, should the Castro resume dissolve?
It's like highly recommended. I mean, I wouldn't say yes, but I wouldn't say no at the same time. It's kind of a
Okay.
situation.
How does this talk about economic engagement at all?
In one of my partner stated something about the fuel. It would, go down. And if we're within the fuel for our cars would go down, and it'd be better transportation or less money to spend on cars.
And would you please define monoculture?
Monoculture. I couldn't define that.
What about fungicides?
I think those are a type of pesticide. Actually,
What is the definition of diversity?
It's like a bunch of species in one place. It's kind of what it is.
What is your definition of GHG emissions?
That's greenhouse gases. It's kind of like, it's like global warming, carbon dioxide, CO2, all that stuff.
And what is your definition of renewable?
You can use it over and over again. It will never run out.
And your definition of multi-gate?
Judge ready? Opponent ready? I'm going to start by answering a question that was asked in the previous CX, and then I will give some additional points to the topics we've brought up thus far. My opponent recently asked, how is death related to the human death related to the subject at hand? And how is human death not related to the subject at hand? He was saying we should trade with this country that lets people die and voluntarily kills people because they want to get their way and they don't view human life as something that matters. Do you really want to trade with someone who doesn't think human life is sacred? I think not. I believe that the Cuban embargo needs to stay and that we need to continue not trading with Cuba, which makes their entire plan moot because we cannot trade with Cuba to get the Cuban cane sugar to make the new oil. And while yes, pollution is bad, pollution is constantly going to happen. It doesn't matter if you change the oil, people are still going to drive cars. And cars still create gas, which pollutes the ecosystem. It's going to happen for as long as humans are the dominant species of this planet. Pollution will happen for as long as mankind rules the world. And yes, while this would lower the rates of pollution a bit, it still will not solve the entire problem, and it'll actually cause more problem because we cannot trade with the Castro regime to get this sugar for the oil to make the better gas and ethanol because it's simply immoral and wrong for us to do so. And the policies we've put in place, these embargoes that we've made, they need to stay because they show what America stands for and what its policies signify of its nation. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
A recent American report directly said direct consequences of use of nuclear weapons, especially low-yield devices, most likely to be in the hands of non-state actors or irresponsible governments. Nuclear weapons would not be great enough to bring about significant.
Do you want to rope them? Sure. First, I will be pointing up some holes in my opponent's economic plan, and then I will be going through my own list of different problems and questions that have concerned
Venezuela and U.S. relations as of right now. Judge ready? Opponents ready? Partner ready? Again. My opponent said that this would not take manpower. We would just have to ask to open economic trade as long as they offer to, or as long as they actually privatize the oil industry. And we would have to send people over to make sure that they do that privatization. And he also said at one point that the workers were not educated enough to take care of the machinery and technology that is behind the oil production. Thus, we would need to send people to make sure that it is all used correctly and the money is used properly. The United States is justified in its reluctance to further engage with Venezuela. Point 1. Legitimate questions surround the outcome of the 2013 presidential election. Subpoint A. The electoral margin was less than 1%. Foster stated in 2013, Nicolas Maduro, 50, a former bus driver and union activist, beat the fresh-faced opposition leader Enrique Capriles by just 1.5%, or 235,000 votes, despite widespread expectations of a comfortable win. Election analysts suggested that the eventual margin of victory could even narrow to less than 1% once the votes of overwhelmingly pro-opposition expatriate Venezuelans were counted. Subpoint B, many instances of electoral irregularities occurred. Foster again stated in 2013. Mr. Capriles, who had campaigned vigorously against the legacy of Chavez's 14-year socialist revolution, refused to recognize the result and demanded an immediate recount. He claimed that thousands of incidents of electoral malpractice needed to be examined. The National Electoral Council insisted yesterday that the result was irreversible. Even if it does stand, it leaves Venezuela facing mounting economic problems, rampant inflation, and food shortages, with a president who now holds only a wafer-thin mandate. This was a terrible result for the new president, Professor Antonio Cubas, a leading Venezuelan political analyst, told the Daily Telegraph. It leaves him sitting on top of a volcano. The economy is in ruins, and the country is divided, and he is totally unprepared for the job. Point two. There's no reason to believe that Maduro is willing to engage with the United States. Subpoint A. Maduro has continued the Chavez policy of attacking U.S. foreign policy. Newman stated in 2013 that Venezuela is a major oil supplier to the United States with immense reserves, and under Mr. Chavez, it has also been a major thorn in Washington's side, wielding its oil and its diplomatic muscle to oppose American policy everywhere from Cuba to Syria. Mr. Chavez, who succumbed to cancer on March 5th, built his political career on flaying the United States and its traditional allies in the Venezuelan establishment, and Mr. Maduro followed his mentor's script throughout the campaign with an acolyte zeal. He accused former American diplomats of plotting to kill him, suggested that the United States has caused Mr. Chavez's illness, and had his foreign minister shut the door on informal talks with the United States that began late last year. A senior State Department official in Washington said the harsh rhetoric had made the possibility of improved relations more difficult. There is evidence here that Maduro does not even want to communicate with the United States openly. He does not want to make this possibility. So who's to believe that he would take this money and agree to do what my opponent has suggested in privatizing the oil industry? Subpoint B, Maduro knows that he would lose his support base if he engages in the U.S. Kroll, 2012, states, Chavez managed with charisma and no small amount of effort to hold together his following's many interest groups. For the less popular Maduro, a step towards austerity could lose him support among the poor, and an olive branch offered to the United States could cause the far left to turn on him. All this comes as decisive measures are needed to plug holes in an economy fast taking on water. Last year, the government spent about 40% more than it received in revenue, in part on welfare programs and election year giveaways. As a percentage of economic output, its tide of red ink is worse than that facing economically troubled Greece, Spain, and Portugal, said Francisco Ibarra, an economist with the Econometrica consulting firm in Caracas, the capital. Maduro has nothing to gain from working with the United States. In fact, he has more to lose if he takes this money and agrees to do what the United States says we need to do, what my opponent has said the United States needs to say to Venezuela. He would lose his supporters, and he would not remain president for very long if he does what my opponent has stated. Point 3. Venezuela deserves U.S. economic sanctions because of its assistance to Iran. Subpoint A, Venezuela openly undermines United States sanctions against Iran. Goforth stated in 2012, Iran and Venezuela cooperate on nuclear technology. Venezuela sends gasoline to Iran with the express purpose of helping the Islamic Republic bear the weight of UN sanctions, underlying one of the great ironies of the Islamic Republic's existence. It must import gas because it lacks domestic refineries. Iran uses Venezuela's financial system to carry out transactions prohibited by sanctions, which almost certainly fund Iran's nuclear program. An Islamic terrorist loyal to Iran operate in Venezuela, serving as an advance front for retaliating against the West in the event that the United States or Israel launches an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. So not only is Venezuela saying that our foreign policy is wrong and incorrect, it is stating that they are not stating that, they are acting and helping Iran by sending them gas and making sure that they have gas to operate their nuclear facilities and allowing terrorists from Iran to come and operate in Venezuela. Subpoint B, Venezuela serves as a source of uranium for Iran. Max stated in 2011. According to an article published in the German newspaper Die Welt, in November 2010, one of the agreements signed between Iran and Venezuela in October 2010 would establish a military base on Venezuelan soil to be jointly operated by both countries on which medium-range missiles would be placed. On May 13, 2011, Die Welt further reported that Chavez met with the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Air Force in February 2011 to discuss the final details of the construction of the missile base, which is now being built only 75 miles from the Venezuelan-Colombian border. It is also believed that Iran is pursuing the exploration of uranium in Venezuela, an obvious ingredient necessary for Iran's continued development of nuclear rockets. We have put huge embargoes on countries for putting nuclear bases in. Look at what we've done to Cuba. It's been over 50 years that we've had that embargo on Cuba simply because they built missile bases there. And that we did that because they were a direct threat to us. And Venezuela is more of a threat to the nations around it, but it still could be a threat to the United States. And we need to take the same actions against them that we have taken against Cuba and be just as strong as we have been against Cuba, and make sure that we do not open trade policies with them and work with them because they are not a nation that wants to work with us or a nation that we should engage economically with. Thank you. Over to CX.
Alright, when you stated that we were going to be sending gas, or that Venezuela was sending gas to Iran, what type of gas? Was it like natural gas or gasoline?
It was gasoline.
Alright, why would Iran need to have gasoline imported? Isn't it right there in the Middle East, the head of all the
Yes,
oil?
but as I stated in my research, they do not have the domestic refineries to get that gasoline for themselves.
Alright. Do you know how many oil companies there are in Venezuela?
I do not have the exact number now.
Okay. I guess that's all my questions then.
Thank you.
Prep time, please.